The greatest threat to terrorist groups like the Islamic State, the Taliban, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, and Al-Qaeda is not a UN resolution or the U.S. military. The greatest threat to terrorists is an informed population, because only an informed population can undermine the ideology that gives rise to jihad. With this in mind, let's go through 10 facts about the Qur'an, history's most effective manual for violently subjugating nations and cultures. Fact number 1. The word Qur'an means recitation. The Qur'an is something that's supposed to be recited from memory. Muhammad and his companions weren't big on reading, and in Muhammad's time, portions of the Qur'an were only written down as memory aids. It wasn't until later that some of his followers came up with the idea of putting it all together into book form. So, why would Muslims want to recite the Qur'an? Because, fact number 2, Muslims believe that the Qur'an is the word of Allah. The angel Gabriel, as the story goes, delivered verses to Muhammad, and Muhammad passed these verses on to his followers. But as far as the Qur'an is concerned, Gabriel and Muhammad were mailmen. It's the word of Allah, not the words of Gabriel or Muhammad. Why do Muslims believe that the Qur'an is the word of Allah? Because, fact number 3, Muhammad said so. The Qur'an was supposedly revealed to one man, Muhammad. Unlike the Bible, which contains numerous shorter works written by around 40 different authors, the Qur'an stands or falls with the lone testimony of Muhammad, a guy whose first impression of his revelations was that they were demonic, a guy who repeatedly tried to kill himself, a guy who believed he was the victim of magic spells that gave him delusional thoughts and false beliefs, a guy who delivered verses to his followers and later blamed the devil for tricking him, a guy who had sex with a 9-year-old girl, had 9 wives at one time, even though the Qur'an says Muslims can only have 4, married the divorced wife of his own adopted son after causing the divorce, told his followers it's okay to beat their wives into submission, and so on. So, what evidence did Muhammad offer to show that his revelations were from Allah? Fact number 4. Muhammad's main argument for the inspiration of the Qur'an was what we'll call the argument from literary excellence, one of the silliest arguments ever offered by anyone for anything. My poetry is better than your poetry, so my poetry must be the inspired word of Allah. The idea is that no one can produce something as wonderful as or more wonderful than the Qur'an. Now, there are all kinds of things we could do to make the Qur'an better than it is. We could take out the verses about slaughtering unbelievers, or about raping female captives, or about having sex with prepubescent girls. But one simple way to improve the Qur'an would be to put it in chronological order. Because, fact number 5, the Qur'an is not arranged chronologically. Apart from the first chapter, which is a short prayer, the rest of the Qur'an is basically arranged from the longest chapters to the shortest chapters. But the longer chapters were generally much later than the shorter chapters, so the Qur'an is thoroughly disorganized, making it very difficult to read. You might not care about the order, but it's actually extremely important because, fact number 6, some parts of the Qur'an abrogate or cancel other parts of the Qur'an. Later revelations typically abrogate earlier revelations, but since the Qur'an isn't arranged chronologically, we don't know which verses are canceled and which verses still apply without massive collections of commentaries to help sift through this mess. You'll recall that the Qur'an's main argument for its divine origin is that it's so incredibly well written. It must be from God. Yeah, it's so wonderfully written that no one can understand what they're supposed to do without consulting a team of scholars. This is my modern take on the Qur'an. What did Muhammad's contemporaries think of it? Fact number 7. Muhammad's contemporaries were convinced that the Qur'an was plagiarized from earlier sources. How do we know what they thought about the Qur'an? We know because the Qur'an repeatedly tells us that Muhammad's contemporaries accused him of stealing his stories from others. How did Muhammad respond to charges of plagiarism? He declared that, fact number 8, the Qur'an is a continuation of previous scriptures. The reason so much of the Qur'an sounded so familiar to the people of Arabia wasn't that Muhammad was plagiarizing earlier sources. Those earlier sources were also the word of Allah. That's why they sounded the same. Of course, Muslims today know that those earlier sources thoroughly contradict the Qur'an, so they're forced to claim that the earlier sources were corrupted. This is extremely odd because, fact number 9, the Qur'an was only compiled into a book because much of it was lost. According to Muslim sources, entire chapters of the Qur'an were forgotten. Large passages came up missing. Verses vanished. This was in spite of the fact that Allah promised, He promised in chapter 15, verse 9, to protect the Qur'an from corruption. He couldn't do it, which calls into question the rest of what He said. Why is this relevant? Because, fact number 10, the Qur'an is the highest authority on matters of Sharia, raping captives, beating women into submission, chopping off hands for stealing, grown men marrying little girls. These things come from this book, which most certainly is not the Word of God. Learn these facts, my friends, and share them with others. If you like the sources for anything I've said in this video, click on the link in the description box. It's all there, waiting for you to do your part in throwing a great big freedom-sized monkey wrench in the jihad machine. And since there's much more the world needs to know about Islam, click on this subscribe button so you'll know when I post my next video, which I assure you will be awesome.